Hi everyone, welcome to BYRDI at Home with the Blends of the Virtual World by Beam Suntory. My name's Luke and I'm going to be talking through a few different workshops relating to a variety of bartending topics, from fermentation to foraging. And what we're going to do is showcase some recipes that we make here at BYRDI and some of my own personal recipes for you to make home and also at your own bars using minimal equipment. Okay, today we're going to be talking about sugars and acids in cocktails, and also talking about the more commonly used sugars and acids, and maybe discussing some alternatives for you to use rather than those more commonly used ones. So the most commonly used sugars and acids when you're talking about cocktails and classic cocktails are basic sugars in their raw form, processed sugars, and citrus is the most obvious one. Things like whiskey sours and that sort of thing, they're not possible without fresh lemon juice to get that acidity in a cocktail. But what I'm going to talk about today and show you is that there's some alternative ways that we can go about introducing acid and sweeteners to our cocktails. So when we're talking about sugars and alternative sweeteners, one really good one to use instead of a processed sugar is honey. Honey is a really good one that we use here a lot at BYRDI, not only because it's adding sweetness to the cocktail, but it's also adding an element of flavor as well. And also, like we talked about previously, an element of seasonality and a sense of place. All honeys are different from wherever you're from, so depending on what trees the bees or flowers the bees are pollinating, this can really influence the flavor of the honey. So honey is a really great ingredient to use because it's not only going to add an element of sweetness, but it's also going to influence your drink in terms of flavor. And the flavor is going to really tell a story about the time and the place where you are, depending on the time of the year and where the honey is extracted. So a really good example of a classic cocktail using honey is something like a bee's knees cocktail, which is just 3 ingredients: gin, lemon, and honey. Alternatives to using citrus, however, a really great example is the use of vinegar in cocktails. And this isn't actually a new concept. Vinegar's been used in cocktails for a long time. This can be seen as an example in some very old cocktail books with some very classic recipes in the form of what's called a shrub. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the term shrub, it is not a small bush or a tree. It is a recipe that is the combination of a vinegar, a juice from a fruit, and sugar. And that is pre-mixed together to add not only sweetness but also acidity into cocktails. Quite often different herbs and spices were added to these shrubs as well to add later to the drinks. So the use of vinegar in cocktails, like I said, it's not a new concept. It's been used in drinks for a long time now, but it can be a bit tricky. Vinegar acidity can be quite sharp, especially in store-bought vinegars that have been regulated to heighten that acidity so that they last longer on the shelf. What I'm going to show you and share with you is a recipe that we use here at BYRDI to create our own vinegars from scratch. And it starts off by literally creating our own mother culture, or what's called a SCOBY. And then from that SCOBY, we can create a whole range of different flavored vinegars. Okay, so here I'm going to show you how to make your vinegar mother, or SCOBY. So, and this is going to become your starter culture to then create whatever different flavored vinegars you want. Different fruit vinegars, herbal vinegars, that sort of thing. So really simple. It's probably one of the easiest recipes I'm going to show you. Very minimal equipment. You're going to have your jar once again, but the opening of the jar, the lid, we're actually going to take off and we're going to seal this just with some cloth, tea towel, muslin cloth, even a bit of like tissue, paper towel, that sort of thing, and a rubber band just over the top to seal that. The reason why we're going to be doing that is, like we were talking about in the fermentation workshop, this is an aerobic style of fermentation. the acetic acid bacteria needs oxygen to survive. So we basically want our mother and our vinegar to be able to breathe, okay? Then by putting the cloth, it's allowing that oxygen in, but it's also stopping any nasty things like bugs and that sort of thing getting in. In terms of ingredients, really simple, like I was saying. First off, you need some fresh apple juice. Okay, so fresh is always best if you can juice it yourself from fresh apples. I would try not to use store-bought. If you are using store-bought juice and that's the only one you can get, that's okay. But really just try and make sure it is as unadulterated as possible. So you just want apple juice, something with no preservatives in there. Basically, those preservatives are really going to stop that acetic bacteria and stop that fermentation, because that's what preservatives are designed to do. Okay. The second ingredient is a apple cider vinegar. Now, there's a couple of particular brands that you can use, but essentially all you need to worry about is making sure it's an apple cider vinegar that includes its own mother. Okay, so raw apple cider vinegar, again, no preservatives added to it, and that's going to really kickstart this fermentation. You can make your own vinegar with the mother here from different things like wine, for example. It's just a bit of a longer process, but the process is very much the same. You would add your wine and then add a cloth here so it can breathe, and you would leave it for a certain period of time to let that acetic acid bacteria build up, and it's going to start eating away at the sugars within the alcohol of the wine, and then you'll start seeing your mother forming. However, we're going to skip a step there, make it a lot easier by getting this raw apple cider vinegar to start with. It's going to speed things up a lot more for you. Okay, so now a really important step not to forget is to make sure our jar is sterilized. So really simple way of sterilizing, like we were talking about in the previous workshop, is just submerging in some boiling water for a couple of minutes, and that will kill any harmful bacteria that we don't want. Okay, so it's a nice, clean, sterilized jar, and now we're just going to add both our apple cider, raw apple cider, and our fresh apple juice. Equal parts. Okay, so you can do as much as you want, but you won't need a lot of this, because this, again, remember, this is just going to be your starter culture. So you're not going to need liters and liters of this, because once you've got your vinegar mother forming, you can use that by tearing off the mother and adding it to different vinegars. So you won't need a lot. So I've just added 500 mils of the vinegar and 500 mils of the juice. Once it's all there in the jar, quite simply, put your cloth over here and then seal it with your rubber band. Okay. Now, it won't take long for this recipe to start forming a mother. Keep checking it daily. The best thing to do is not to touch it at all. Okay. If you're agitating a lot or even taking this on and off, you run the risk of outside bad bacteria coming in and interfering with that acetic acid bacteria. So what you want to do is just literally leave it. Okay. It'll take a few days, maybe up to a week, and then you'll see this vinegar mother forming. Okay. When you're storing this, it's really important to remember, store this at room temperature, somewhere that's not too hot, not too cold. In a warmer environment, the fermentation is going to kick off a lot easier. And when it's colder, in the colder winter months, it's going to take a lot longer. Another one is to keep it away from sunlight. Sunlight really affects our bacteria that we want growing. So it doesn't like too much sunlight. So try and keep it in a dark place if possible. Okay, now we've got our starter culture, or our mother, or SCOBY. And then from here, we can create our own flavored vinegars. So this is our vinegar mother here that we've started previously. I'm just going to take out the SCOBY so you can take a look at it, and you can probably see in the jar here it floating, and it looks quite sort of otherworldly, almost a bit alienish, but this is what happens. And if you can see this, you see this quite gelatinous formation here. This is our vinegar mother. Okay. So this is just a whole heap of that acetic acid bacteria, and that's what's going to convert all of our sugars or alcohols or whatever we want to ferment into our vinegar. Okay, and so these are pretty resilient, and they will keep growing. So like I said earlier, you don't need to make a lot of your first starter culture. Once you've got some, you can then just keep on using the same one. So what we would literally do is we can tear a piece of this off and then put it into another jar. So for example here, this is used from our vinegar mother, and we've created a passion fruit vinegar. Just by some white wine and a whole heap of fresh passion fruit, okay? And then basically what we've then done is added a piece of our original vinegar mother into this, and then that's going to start eating away at the alcohol from the wine and the sugar from the passion fruit. And there you have it. Then you've got a passion fruit vinegar that you can then introduce a passion fruit flavor, but also an acidity into your cocktail. So then all of a sudden you can work with so many more flavors and different combinations of acidity in your drinks, rather than just sticking with the traditional lemon and lime. Okay guys, so now that we've got a base understanding of what a vinegar is, how to create our own vinegars, I'm now going to show you a way of how to add both sugar and acidity, or sweetness and acidity, into a cocktail at one go. We're also going to use what we previously learnt in the fats and oils workshop, and that is the use of fats or oils to add flavour into our drinks with the use of a fat washing technique. So this is kind of branching out from that as well. So what we're going to make today is a vinegar caramel that we're going to introduce to a cocktail to not only introduce sweetness, but also a little element of acidity and also flavour. Okay, for our vinegar caramel, first off starts with our vinegar. So this is a honey and fig leaf caramel. So some fig leaves that we foraged for earlier and that we talked about in our earlier seasonality workshop, and a local honey, okay? This was combined with a vinegar mother, okay, and then made a honey and fig leaf vinegar. So we've got 600 mils of this. Then we've just got caster sugar, okay, and we're going to caramelize this at 900 grams of caster sugar. And then we've got our fats. So we've got our milk, full cream milk, 300 mils, and then we've got 300 grams of butter, okay. So really simple, we're going to add our caster sugar into our pot. Then add our vinegar. Okay, and so next up what we're going to do is put this on a heat, okay? Bring this to the boil for a considered amount of time until those sugars start to caramelize, okay? Once those sugars start to caramelize and really start to boil off, what we're going to do is then quickly take it off the heat, add our butter and our milk. And what that's going to do is really emulsify with our vinegar and sugar, and it's also going to stop it from burning as well. So it's a pretty foolproof recipe for making a caramel here. Okay, so now that you can see it's really starting to caramelize, you can see how all these bubbles are starting to really slow up and become a lot more viscous. Also, a good sign that a lot of the water content has left is there's a lot less steam coming off this. Okay, so now is the perfect time. We want to take this off the heat, and we add our butter and now our milk, and then stir that through. Okay, so now that you guys are comfortable making your own vinegars and you've got your own SCOBY to use, I'm going to share with you a really easy recipe. This is for my honey vinegar that we use here at BYRDI. Okay, so really easy. 1 kilogram of raw honey. It's very important that it's raw. Then you've got 2 liters of water. 700 mils of wine, preferably white wine. Sparkling wine is great. If you can get like an unfiltered wine, it's even better. That's going to really contribute to the honey vinegar fermenting, and it's got a lot of those sugars from the alcohol in there that the SCOBY is going to eat. And then 250 mils plus a little section of your starter vinegar and a section of your starter mother. Again, in a sterilized jar. Put your top on your muslin cloth or tea towel or anything, rubber band, let that sit in a dark place, not too cold. And then after a few weeks, you'll have honey vinegar. Okay, so we've talked a lot about vinegars and how to use vinegars to introduce acidity to your drinks. And vinegars is just one form of an acid or acidity that you can use. There's tons of different acids that you can use, and especially acids in their raw form that are derived from natural fruits. So citric acid is the most common one from citrus fruits, lemon, lime. But then you've got a lot of a magnitude of different acids that come derived from other fruits. So things like ascorbic acid is derived from oranges, and even strawberries have ascorbic acid. You have malic acid from apples, folic acid from leafy greens, tartaric acid is very common acid derived from grapes. So what we can do then is to use those different acids for different purposes. So depending on the cocktail and what base spirit you're using or fruit that you're using, if you're making a cocktail with grapes or any other spirits that are distilled from different things, you can use that to your advantage. So if you want to have that nice sweet tart apple flavor or that apple sourness, malic acid would be a perfect acid to use for that. Tartaric acid for that more rounded sourness from like a grape, and the list goes on. So it's always good to sort of have different acids for different things, okay? So then again, you're not tied to using citric acid or lemon juice, lime juice for everything, because when we're doing that, when we're using lemon juice, lime juice all the time, it contributes to our drinks quite often just starting to taste the same over and over again. So if we mix it up a little bit and use these different acids to our advantage, you're going to add to the complexity of your drinks and add a lot more variety to your drinks. Sugars are exactly the same. So different sugars for different drinks as well. So if you want to have like a very raw tasting drink, I would always recommend using a raw sugar, brown sugars, things that are unrefined. If you want nice clean tasting, you don't necessarily want too much flavor, you just want an added sweetness, then a white caster sugar is perfect for that. Other things like raw sugar cane juice, okay, is another form of sweetness that you can use. We've mentioned honey again. Even there's other derivatives of sugar like coconut sugar and things like that as well. So always keep that in mind, not using the same sugar for everything. Okay, now that we've got our caramel vinegar made from our fig leaf and honey vinegar, and turned that into a caramel. You can see that here. What I've actually done is I've stored this in the refrigerator, and it becomes much easier to handle rather than being a liquid and it's all sticky. So it's in a solid caramel here now, so you can actually just weigh that out, okay? So what we're gonna do now is the fun part. We're gonna make a drink with our vinegar caramel, and also some fig leaves from foraging earlier that we talked about in our foraging workshop or seasonality workshop. So this is gonna be a really simple twist on an old fashioned using Jim Beam rye whiskey, okay? So an old fashioned, very simple drink, whiskey, sugar, bitters, okay? And what we're gonna do is sort of just add a layer of complexity to that classic drink by adding an element of acidity with our caramel vinegar. There's also going to be that added complexity from the flavor of the fig leaves that really contributes to the Jim Beam rye that has that very earthy and caramel notes as well. So first up, if you've got your jar at home, basically you've got your fig leaves. So 2 big fig leaves like this is perfect. For those of you who haven't used fig leaves before, they're a really great ingredient to use. They've got not necessarily a flavor of straight figs. They've almost got like a bit of a coconut sort of flavor as well. So it's really great to use in drinks. One of my favorite ingredients to use. Now we've got our vinegar caramel, okay? So this is gonna add the sweetness to the drink, but also add that added layer of acidity. So 300 grams of this vinegar caramel. And it is in a nice big clump there like that. Don't worry, that will dissolve because we're going to heat this a little bit later. And then we've got our Jim Beam rye whiskey, 700 mils. Okay, so that's all in our jar now. We're going to seal that up. And then what we're going to do again, like we did in our fat washing workshop, what we did is we put this over a heat. Okay, so just in some hot water for at least sort of 3 or 4 hours, and that's going to sort of melt all of that caramel, so then all the flavors of the vinegar caramel wash through the whiskey, and it's also going to release all the flavor from the fig leaves as well. And then after we've heated that, we're then going to put that in the freezer again, okay? So using everything again that you learnt from the fats and oils workshop. Okay, so once this is cooked, again, 3-4 hours, at a low heat, 55 degrees, don't have to be super accurate about this, you know, just put it in a pot of hot water and occasionally top that up with some boiling water from your kettle will do. If you have a sous vide bath at home, that's even better. This is how we do it at BYRDI here. So you can see we've got all our ingredients in a vacuum bag, and then we will place that in a sous vide bath, 55 degrees for 4 hours. But by all means, you can still use your jar for this. You get the same results. So once it's cooked, we're going to put that in the freezer, solidify all the solids and all the oils and fats from the butter and milk that we put into our caramel, and then we're going to be able to filter it out, and we'll have a delicious fig leaf and honey vinegar caramel old fashioned. Okay, so now that we've filtered our cocktail, we've got our Jim Beam rye whiskey infused with our fig leaves and our vinegar caramel. That's filtered out, ready to go. Now we're just making the drink. So 75 mils. And just want to stir that over ice. This is a really simple old-fashioned style cocktail. So just chilling that, also adding a little bit of dilution as well, allowing all the flavors to open up. Better taste. You'll taste straight away that fig leaf characteristic. It's a really unique flavor, and you should get that sweetness and then that added layer of acidity from your vinegar caramel. And then we're just going to strain it over some fresh ice in a rocks glass. Okay, and then just finishing it off with a fig leaf coin from that infusion. So we're making use, not just throwing away the fig leaves because they'll still have a lot of aroma. And there you go. We've got the fig leaf and vinegar caramel Jim Beam rye old fashioned. Okay guys, thanks a lot for watching. Hope you enjoyed. That wraps up our workshop on sugars and acids. Hope you have fun making the recipes yourselves at home. Next up, our workshop focusing on the topic of texture.